Thanks for staying with us. It's now time for first hot topic for today, and the hot topic. I'm trying to get there. Don't worry. So we're being joined by Mr. Nyangul Agule, who will be looking at this, and it is talking about the fact that federal government may resort to borrowing to settle part of the 4 trillion naira owed to power generation companies, GENCOs. And this is according to the Minister of Power, Adelabu. During a meeting with the leadership of the Association of Power Generation Companies, APGC, Adelabu said the government plans to pay substantial portion in cash and the rest via promissory notes. The minister acknowledged the sector's liquidity crisis and assured that the proposed debt resolution would be presented to President Bola Tinubu with the goal of clearing the debt within 6 months. APGC leaders warned that the huge debt burden is crippling operations and threatens the collapse of Nigeria's power ecosystem. Now, Adelabu, that's the minister, emphasized the need for a fully liberalized power market and called for the adoption of cost-reflective tariffs. He stated that the government could no longer sustain indefinite subsidies and pledged regulatory reforms to boost transparency, reduce levies, and support targeted subsidies for the vulnerable. Like I said, our guest this morning is Mr. Nyangul Agule, who is also an energy expert. Good morning and welcome to the program, Mr. Agule.
Good morning, Mr. Nyangul, and good morning to our viewers globally.
Well, here we are. The government will source money from somewhere to come and pay electricity debt. And I don't know whether in the same breath we heard that there's going to be an improvement in electricity supply and generation in Nigeria. But let's hear you on the issue right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nyangul. It's a sad situation. We have spoken on electricity for so long. To underscore the importance of electricity to an economy, there were 2 recent incidents. Power cut to Heathrow Airport, grounded the airport. More than 1,500 flights were cancelled in one day. Power cuts in Spain and Portugal grounded their economies. Citizens poured out onto the streets and nothing was happening. That is what happens if you don't have adequate power. So Nigeria's electricity supply as we speak today is 5,000 megawatts, which is perhaps the poorest electricity supply in the world, considering a population of 200 million. Now, what are the issues? First, we thank Mr. President for stepping in to try and deal with the debt owed the GENCOs. And it's not only the GENCOs that are owed debt anyway. Even the transmission company of Nigeria is owed debt, and the DISCOs are also owing debt. Now, Mr. Nyangul, let us put the situation like this. If we generate 1 megawatt of electricity and sell 1 megawatt of electricity and collect the cash, there will not be any debt because the cash has been collected and the people who provided the electricity, which is the DISCOs, the TCN, and the GENCOs, and even MBET, will be paid. Debt has arisen because we have generated electricity, but we have not collected money for the electricity. And what is the reason that we have not collected the money? There is what we call aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses. So when you generate electricity, let's say 500 megawatts is generated at a power plant. If that 500 megawatts ends up in the market and it is sold, there will be liquidity in the system. There will be no issue because we have generated enough money from the sale of 500 megawatts and we can settle all the operators. The reason why we are not generating money from 500 megawatts is, number one, there are technical losses. When you move the electricity from Egbin to say maybe the market in Abuja, along the way, some of the electricity is lost because of old equipment. That is the technical losses. Number two, there is commercial losses. It's not all of the electricity that ends up in the market. Because the transmission company of Nigeria lacks capacity to wheel that electricity safely to the market in Abuja. Thirdly, there are losses from people who are stealing the electricity. Yeah, so they are not buying it officially. It's also a commercial loss. Meaning, all of the electricity that we have generated, we didn't supply all of it to the market. That is the commercial loss. Then we have the collection loss. The collection loss is that even the electricity that we end up supplying, people are not paying for it. We are not collecting all of it. And because of that, you now discover that the 500 megawatts that were generated, we didn't get cash for all of it. In fact, I didn't even mention the biggest one. The biggest one is that for some reason at the privatization in 2013, some people set up a contract with the generating companies, which is called take it or pay. So the 500 megawatts that were generated in Egbin, maybe the transmission company of Nigeria has capacity to only wheel 300 megawatts. So only 300 megawatts was put in transmission to go to the disco, but we are going to pay for 500 megawatts because the other 200, which we didn't take, we must also pay for it. So this GENCO's debt of 4 trillion that we're talking about, a huge quantum of it is electricity that didn't even end up in the market. That is electricity that was generated but was not evacuated. Nigerians are still made to pay for it. That is number one. Before the 300 megawatts ends up in transmission, and transmission collapses, the grid collapses, equipment is bad. By the time it lands in Abuja, maybe it is only 250 megawatts. Then in Abuja, the Abuja disco does not have capacity to supply all of the 250 megawatts because transformers are bad. They don't have money to fix the transformers. Cables are down. They don't have money to fix the cables and all of that. More losses. So maybe Abuja now ends up supplying 200 megawatts into the market. The 200 megawatts supplied in the market, maybe up to 80 megawatts is not paid for. People have stolen it. So the electricity that is finally given to consumers is 120 megawatts. Of the 120 megawatts, maybe only 50 megawatts was paid for. 70 megawatts, the disco is still chasing debtors to come and pay, including ASU Villa, including government offices, including military bases. They haven't paid it. So at the end, we only collected money from 50 megawatts to pay for electricity generated of 500 megawatts. This is what is causing the liquidity crisis in the sector. Even if Mr. President goes ahead and pays this debt of $4 trillion to the GENCOs only, and he doesn't fix the broken process in electricity in Nigeria, it is like pouring water into a leaking basket. It's not going to solve the problem. Mr. Nyangul, we can talk about how to solve the problem, but maybe let me give, or should I go ahead and tell you how we should solve the problem?
Yeah, we'll enter immediately into how we'll solve the problem. For instance, the minister said that the power sector needs to be fully liberalized, and I don't know what that means, and if that is part of the solution that we need to reform that sector.
So, Mr. Minister is bringing a solution that is already on the table. the power sector is already liberalized and privatized. He knows.
Yeah, but the thing is, in fact, there's an article that you wrote as well that was trying to compare that kind of thing, the privatization in the telecom sector and the privatization of the power sector. While one worked, the other one is a total failure. So let us see why it failed in the power sector, for instance, because in the telecoms, it succeeded. So what is it that made it fail in the power sector? Because we can start solutions from knowing what the problem is.
Thank you very much. That should be the focus of the minister. Because if the minister is saying, let us liberalize the sector, that solution has already been provided. In 2013, the power sector was not only liberalized, it was also privatized. And we have private sector in the generating of power. We have a private sector in the distribution of power. The only segment that we don't have private sector is the transmission of power, where government is still holding 100%. So the minister should have rather said, well, we have to make this privatization work. That is what he should have said, not that we should liberalize. It's already been done. Okay, so why did the power sector privatization fail, unlike the telecoms? Here are the issues. Number one, so I will talk about the telecoms and then compare it with power. In telecoms, the licenses were issued to competent operators. The MTNs, the Econets, the Glos, and what is become 9 Mobile now, they were already telecoms operators. They were running these businesses elsewhere. So they had the capital, they had the technology, they had the managerial expertise to land in Nigeria and take the telecoms sector and move it forward. For instance, when they came to Nigeria, they met 500,000 active telephone lines, being supplied to over 100 million Nigerians as at then. And they didn't talk about cost-reflected tariff. They didn't talk about people stealing stealing telephone or anything. They bent down and put in over $100 billion, because they noticed that the opportunity was not in increasing tariffs. The opportunity was in increasing the supply to meet up with the gap, the deficit in telephone offering in Nigeria. And these people, after putting in over $100 billion, they have increased availability of telephone lines in Nigeria from 500,000 to over 220 million lines today. Think about that increase. 500,000, putting $100 billion, we now have over 220 million lines in Nigeria, and with that quantum of supply, the price of telephone has now fallen. And that is what telephone is now for the poor, which a minister had said it was not before. And is available, is readily available, and the service quality has tremendously improved over what NITE was giving us. So that is how telecom succeeded. Let us now benchmark that against power. In 2013, when government privatized, we saw the generation, we didn't sell the transmission, and then we sold the discos. By that process alone, we were already set up for failure. How do I mean? If you privatize generation and you expect private sector to bring in money and increase generation, but you did not privatize transmission, knowing that whatever the people generate, they cannot carry it to the market because transmission is still in government control, underfunded. Then what do you expect the discos that you privatize to supply to the market? Can government put one reason up why they did not privatize transmission? Nyangul, just for the purpose of making it easy for our viewers, let me put it in an analogy that a lot of people can connect with. Let's say we're talking about agriculture. Agriculture involves actually cropping, the farms. That is producing food in the farm, and then transportation of the food from the farm to the market, and then you have the market. Government now say, oh, we are not producing enough food. They now came and privatized the farm where you are expected to produce a lot of food. They did not deal with carrying the food from the farm to the market. Then they went to the market, they privatized the market. Can this agriculture increase? This agriculture is not going anywhere because whatever you produce in the farm, you don't have the vehicles to carry it to the market. So there will not be food in the market. I know President Tinubu was not here when the decision was taken, but he's been 2 years in office. So we can ask him the question, Mr. President, can you tell us why in 2 years you believe that the privatization of the power sector will succeed, where it's only the generation that has been privatized and transmission that should carry that generation to the market is not privatized, acting as a bottleneck, and distribution can only supply what transmission has given them. How do you expect power to succeed? That is number one. Number two, the generation were sold to the Tony Elumelus and the Otedolas. They probably have the money to invest. But transmission is a bottleneck, like we said. So they can't invest because some of the grid collapses you see is generation trying to push more power into transmission. Transmission can't carry it. It just shuts down. Then coming to the discos, Nyangul. The discos are the ones that collect money. In all of the power sector operators, it's the discos that collect money. If the discos are unable to collect money, it will create liquidity problem for everybody. Who were the people that were giving these discos licenses? Which one among them of the 11 discos had the capacity, the financial capacity, the managerial and the technical capacity to develop the distribution network such that the issues that we are facing, which is a lack of supply of electricity theft, and debt owed by people who are consuming electricity and not paying. What capacity does the discos have to deal with that? And if Mr. President is not able to deal with that, he pays a 4 trillion debt today, tomorrow he will pay another 4 trillion debt because the people who should be collecting the money to bring liquidity into the sector, Mr. Nyangul, of the 11 discos we have in Nigeria, unlike the telecoms privatization, where we know that the MTNs were already regional giants in telecoms business, which of these 11 discos was doing power business before they came to Nigeria? And let me shock our viewers. I will shock our viewers here. I, AGULE, as a Nigerian citizen, I paid my money to the Corporate Affairs Commission, and I did a search on the corporate filings of the 11 discos in Nigeria. I was interested in looking at their capital structure to see whether they have enough money to deal with distribution in Nigeria. Shockingly, Mr. Nyangul, I will tell you that the whole 11 discos in Nigeria, their total capital is 875 million. 875 million. The question to ask the government of Nigeria is that, how do they believe that companies, 11 companies that have only 875 million can deal with distribution in Nigeria? President Tinubu was not there when it happened. It happened in 2013. But President Tinubu has been there for 2 years. Has he bothered to look at the financial, technical, and managerial capacity of the 11 discos? Does he believe that 875 million is going to, I'm not talking about dollars, Mr. Nyangul. I'm talking about 875 million is the total. If you want, I can read to you each and every one of the discos that share capital structure. I have it. I have the document. And I'm ready to present it to anybody. I've paid for it officially, and I've got it. So if Mr. President doesn't believe that 875 million capitalization can expand distribution network in Nigeria, and yet he has allowed these companies who don't have the money to sit on distribution in Nigeria, and now he's busy going to solve the problem that they have created, I think we have to ask Mr. President that question. Because he's 2 years in office, and if he came with a plan for electricity in Nigeria, by now he should have dealt with that. Now, what has happened? These discos went and borrowed dollars. Since they don't have capital, they went and borrowed dollars to buy their licenses. And as at the time they bought their licenses, the dollar was 155 naira for $1. You only needed 155 naira to get $1. Total debt they borrowed was about $1.5 billion, which is 232 billion naira. As we speak today, Mr. Nyangul, that debt is 2.25 trillion because dollar has moved from 155 naira to 1,600 naira today. And these distribution companies are pushing those costs, the costs that are being suffered by them from exchange rate losses to us. And that is why the Minister of Power comes and says, cost reflective tariff. What is he talking about? He's telling Nigerians that the discos who didn't have money, yet we get them licenses. And they went and borrowed dollars. Instead of paying 232 billion, they are now having to look for 2.25 trillion. And you Nigerians must bring that 2.25 trillion so that I will give to the discos to go and pay their debt. Is the minister working for us, or he's working for distribution companies or the electricity sector?
So we don't know where we're going with power, and especially now after the debt has been paid, and then we'll cough out 10 billion to make sure that Aso Rock has solar power, and the rest of us Nigerians, we hear that importation of solar panels and all that has been banned or something close to that. We don't know the future of Nigeria power-wise, but we hope that we will get it right. This is a continuing story, and we'll be looking at that sector because a lot depends on power and energy in Nigeria for us to survive. But this is unfortunately where we have to draw the curtain. Mr. Agule, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Nyangul.
All right, we were talking to Mr. Nick Agule, an energy expert himself, and we were dealing with what is happening now, the power sector. There's so much debt there, and the federal government has promised that in a space of 6 months, they are going to pay this 4 trillion naira, but they will borrow money, which means all of us Nigerians are going to pay for that. And we don't know whether electricity or power generally will improve. Let's hope that it will. Well, we'll take a short break and return shortly with our final hot topic for this morning. Stay with us.